And the third step prayer, which is on page 63 of your big book. Hope everybody's got your big book handy, a highlighter, a pen and a piece of paper. The pen and a piece of paper, if you have any questions, write them down so we can ask them at the end, and the highlighter to mark up your book. So the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Don't forget to unmute, Leo.
There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Rob. All right, we are on page XXV, and we are going to be starting the doctor's opinion today. So this is an excellent chapter. Most everybody refers to this one as one of the most important ones. So XXV. We'll talk a little bit about who the doctor is in this case. He's Dr. Silkworth. He is was a foremost well-known doctor that treated addiction. And an interesting thing about Dr. Silkworth was that he had actually come out of retirement to actually work at Towns Hospital, where he basically met Bill and others. And the reason he came out of retirement was because the stock market had crashed and he had lost most of his savings. So one of those times where you basically were retired and things didn't go quite right, and he came out of retirement. We are talking about William D. Silkworth. He was born 22 June of 1873, and he lived until 22 March of 1951. And then Towns Hospital itself was actually closed in 1965. So couple of historical tidbits there. So with that, Rob, turn it over to you.
Okay, we're on page XXV, the beginning of the doctor's opinion. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter.
Yeah, and so we are talking about William D. Silkworth. Convincing testimony, what we mean by that is expert testimony. I underline sufferings of our members and have witnessed a return to health. In other words, that they have recovered. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And obviously, we're validating Dr. Silkworth's credentials here with his being the chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction. So with that, we will look for Rob to read the letter and just look at this as an endorsement for the book. This is something that Dr. Silkworth was asked to do by Bill in order to help validate the book itself. So this is his endorsement.
To whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conception to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their family. This man and over 100 others appears to have recovered. I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group. They may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. These men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. You may rely upon absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Yours very truly, William D. Silkworth, MD.
Thank you, Rob. So as this endorsement, we're talking about the patient that he had attended was a competent businessman, and we're talking about Bill Wilson in this case. And I kind of look at this as it was an alcoholic of the type I had come to regard as hopeless. We look back on page XVI, it's XVI near the bottom. We have a description here. This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. And again, this is Bill Wilson. In that case, he was talking to Dr. Bob, as we well know. But this is that state of mind and body that is basically no medical or physical exercise type of remedy would work. The doctor, and this is the other part of this, the doctor, when he says he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery, the doctor didn't give him that. Dr. Silkworth did not give him the spiritual means by which he was able to recover. I highlighted this. He commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. And this is a reminder, and we'll see this again and again throughout the book, that working with others, or step 12, is imperative for an alcoholic to be recovered and stay recovered. Okay, personally know of, I highlighted this, he also personally knows of scores of cases who were of this type with whom other methods had failed completely. Again, we're talking about those medical and physical exercise type things that were going on. And inherent to this group, they may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. And again, we're talking about a new chapter, a group of men and women that have been able to find recovery through a spiritual means. Rob?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to bring up about this. Bill went in 1934, his third treatment. Some people say fourth treatment, but we know for sure that in the book it says his third treatment. He had gained some information from Evie, and he step 12 here is that he, as part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conception to other alcoholics. Now, what threw me off when I first started coming to Big Book Studies and started reading this is, why would a doctor allow a patient that's been in treatment for the third time to work with other patients? And I couldn't figure it out. It just boggled my mind. You know, doctors have all this medical knowledge, all this information, and here he is letting a patient who is, a repeat offender, help other alcoholics. And then somebody in one of the meetings, you know, gave me the reason. And here is what said. Dr. Silkworth says here in his letter, I had come to regard as hopeless the type of alcoholic that Bill and other people were hopeless. He had no remedy for these people. There are certain people that go into treatment, and you know what? They take them off the alcohol, they're fine. But there's a certain type of alcoholic that have the allergy and the malady that no matter what type of treatment, they can drive them out. But once they leave, they start all over again. He saw a difference in Bill. And this is what I was told. Dr. Silkworth saw the difference in Bill this time. And he knew that Bill might have something here. So Dr. Silkworth didn't have the answer. But he thought that Bill might have the answer. So let's let him try. And that made all the difference in the world. To me, it opened up my eyes to say, okay, well, this is why the doctor is doing it. You know, hopefully that helps you. Epic in the book on page XXVI is a period of time made special by someone or something. So I just thought I'd throw that in for a definition for everybody. And the doctor had the humility to say, Bill might have an answer. Wow. How many doctors do you know that have the humility to say that, you know what, I don't have all the answers, but maybe this gentleman does. It's a great way of looking at it. So we're on page XXVI, everybody. The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete.
Yep. And so this is where we first start to introduce both the malady and the allergy. And he says this in the upper part of this particular paragraph, and that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. Okay, so we're talking about the malady of the mind, and then physical allergy, and we'll learn more about this as we go forward. But this is the first part of where we are getting introduced to the two symptoms of alcoholism. And I also highlighted this. It is in our belief, which is of the first 100, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. And we'll talk just a minute here. The fact is that first and foremost, we have that defense against, we don't have a defense against the first drink. And we call that the malady, but really what defines an alcoholic more than anything else is this physical allergy that is triggered once that first drink is taken, and we get to a point where we cannot stop once we start drinking. In other words, we get thirstier. We actually find ourselves wanting more and more and not being able to stop until a couple of things that may happen. One, we black out and completely pass out from drinking, or two, we run out of alcohol and there just simply isn't any more to be had. So that's really the important introduction that we're going to be talking about here as we go along with more of the doctor's opinion. Rob?
Okay, we're on page XXVI, everybody. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account.
Yep, and we'll just keep going. We just talked about the allergy as an introduction, and we'll continue to talk about it as we go forward.
Okay,
Thanks, Rob.
so we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as an altruistic plane. We favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he has then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. The doctor writes.
Yeah. So
From
real quick, what we'll talk about here from what we read just now is that we have this allergy, and it is something that we as laymen value from the standpoint of being able to describe this. And there's time and again, there are people that said, I didn't really understand my alcoholism until somebody described the allergy to me, as well as the malady. But by and large, a lot of people really do start to get what it is with regard to alcoholism when the allergy is explained to them. In the spiritual program that we talk about in this altruistic plane, which is that unselfish service to others, which is what we mean by this altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization. In our day and age, it's more likely to be called rehab or going to a rehab facility. And it makes a good point here. We want to make sure that the person is clear of the initial effects of alcohol. We don't want to be trying to approach or introduce this whole concept to somebody that is still drunk and we're still having severe withdrawal and or hangover effects. You want them to be in a more stable state not too long after they've drank, but you want to make sure that they're not still under the influence. And I also want to talk about the importance of going to hospitalization and or a rehab facility. Approximately, and this is an important point here, approximately 15% of all people that try to detox on their own actually die from detoxing. And I can tell you that this is one of the most serious detoxification processes that we go through. And it's important that you are under the care of somebody that's competent, and in this case, of the doctor or a rehab facility that has specialists there that can actually help you through this initial part of the detoxing of alcohol use. So I want to underline or underscore that and say that this is an important factor, that doing it on your own is a very dangerous thing to do, especially for those that are absolutely real alcoholics. Rob?
Yeah, I'll just say that when this book was written in 1930, or published in 1939, in 1934 and on, Bill would bring people into his home to detox. He would give them a shot every 4 hours, etc., in order to get them through it. Today, we don't have to do that. We have facilities that are specialized for this. But think about bringing somebody home, putting them on your couch. You've got your husband or wife and children with you, and here is a stranger that's sitting in your house going through the trembling, the fog, doesn't know where he is, doesn't know, just going through, well, hell, basically, but this is the things that they did in the early days, and as I say, we don't have to do that now. We are fortunate in the fact of that, but this is the lengths that these people were willing to go through. Are we willing to go through the same for a newcomer? Are we willing to help the newcomer out? And that's what it's all about. How far are we willing to go? These people, Bill and the first 100 people, they went the length. The subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction.
Yep. And we're talking about Dr. Silkworth real quick, and we're talking about Towns Hospital so that we can keep in reference to the historical value of what's being written here. Rob?
Okay. There was therefore a real sense of satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on the subject, which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages.
We'll just keep going.
Okay. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulty beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge.
Yep. And we doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics. One of the things I think is important here is we've got a doctor, a well-known doctor that's a chief physician of a very famous hospital, admitting at this point that medical approaches and physical therapy type of things aren't the only answer, and in these cases that we're talking about, fall short of what is needed and necessary for an alcoholic to recover. So it's really a nice thing to have not only a doctor that acknowledges the fact that there are these hopeless alcoholics out there, but that there is a means by which they can recover that's beyond medical and or physical therapy means. And I'll go to page 162 for this particular last section here, that what Rob just read. And it starts out here: every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients. That's Dr. Silkworth talking to the patients at the Towns Hospital. Understanding our work, he can do this with an eye to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. It's another important point to make with regard to the time that this was written. Bill and others would go to Towns Hospital. They would go to the doctor and ask, are there anyone here that is of a hopeless nature that we can attend to? And what they would do is pull this person that they had selected, by the doctor had selected, and put them in a room by themselves so that they could actually talk to them in private and be able to start the process of this program of recovery. And they also went to others who would help to select, which is an interesting kind of difference that we have now. AA is so well known that in most cases, it's probably word of mouth that gets people into the rooms of AA and getting started with this program. Back then, there was a strong reliance on physicians and clergy to select and find alcoholics to work with. Rob?
Yeah, I'm just going to read some about moral psychology because they mentioned it here. And moral psychology is change mind or thinking. It was founded in 1930s. AA is an early sort of moral psychology which attracted the interest of people young. They assert that alcoholism is not a moral failing, but a disease. Paradoxically, alcoholism can only be cured by a complete moral renovation. An example is lying is wrong, claims the act of lying is wrong while one shouldn't be lazy, claiming a character trait is wrong. Moral psychology is usually divided into three distinct subject areas. And I won't go into that because it takes us into a whole another direction. But the whole idea is moral psychology is to change the mind or thinking. We'll read later on, selfish and self-centered to the core is alcoholism. So we have to change our thinking 180 degrees.
Yeah, excellent, Rob.
Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital. And while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once.
Okay, so real quick, that's Bill W. And two, these ideas were this complete psychic change and this finding of a higher power. And he put them in practice or application at once. He did it immediately. And that's part of what this is important with regard to newcomers and those that are just jumping into the program. You want to get started at once with them with regard to their first step and that powerlessness over alcohol and moving through steps 2 and 3 so that they really get this idea behind trying to and being successful at finding a higher power and that inner strength that they're going to need in order to have that psychic experience, that spiritual experience and being able to tap into that inner strength, that higher power in order to help them overcome and recover from alcohol. Rob?
Here again, Bill is throwing in the idea, step 12, help another alcoholic. Okay? All through this book, we're going to read the same thing. When in doubt, go help another alcoholic. When you're feeling low, go help another alcoholic. Carry this message to the still struggling alcoholic. It helps us just as much as it helps them. Notice how many times in the book, as we keep reading, that Bill keeps saying this thing over and over again. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death.
Back from the gates of death. I just want to punctuate this one in telling you that this is a very serious problem, and a lot of people every day die from alcoholism. So just wanted to kind of underline the seriousness of what we're trying to do here. I'll go back up for just a second here, is that with some misgiving, it's kind of interesting that they probably were a little reluctant to have this layman person come in and actually start to do work in the hospital with alcoholics when they are actually there to be cared for by a doctor. So again, I go back to this admission that Dr. Silkworth was able to make, and that is that there are cases where the medical and physical therapy type of approaches just do not work for these alcoholics, and they need something more. And in this case, that they believe in this power, which is greater than themselves. And the other part of this too is that these and we talk little about it, but it is an important factor, and it's one that defined AA in the beginning, and it became a stalwart position, and that is that they were unselfish, and they gave themselves, they put in the effort and the energy to save other alcoholics, and they did it without profit or recognition, again, as the anonymous part of this. So that is in part why Dr. Silkworth was willing to let them come in, is because they weren't coming in and asking for money. They weren't coming in and trying to make a name for themselves in that regard. They were very, very altruistic in regards to that. Rob?
Yeah, yeah, and as I had said earlier, and I had gone on for a little bit, that, you know, Dr. Silkworth saw a change in Bill. And remember, these people were hopeless. And as our friend Bill from New Jersey always said, you know, if you put less power in front of power less, you know, you still have a little bit of power. But when you put power less, you have no power whatsoever. These people had no solution. You know, Bill at least had a solution here that he was trying out. The doctor saw something incredibly different about Bill and thought, you know what? Anything I've been trying to do hasn't seemed to work, so let's let Bill, you know. And Dr. Silkworth would handpick the people that he thought it would work with. So, you know, and as we can see, we're all sitting here today. Thank you to Dr. Silkworth. Thank you to Bill W. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be a maximum benefit.
Okay, just really quick, I'll just punctuate the fact that medical attention may be necessary, and it is absolutely okay and encouraged. Never do we actually advocate that somebody should not seek medical care. So just wanted to just say that as far as what this is concerned, this short paragraph that you just read. And they want to make sure that they've gone through this procedure before they actually are approached with this program. Rob?
Leo, this page is one of my favorites in the book. It answers so many questions and is so marked up in my book. But as I say, this page is really important. So
we will take our time going through it.
I will read it slowly so that we can really pick up on some of the gems that are right here. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up and become astonishingly difficult to solve.
Right. And this I highlighted and I've marked up myself, Rob, that this is really punctuating a couple of things. We're talking about this this allergy, this manifestation of an allergy, which is the physical allergy where you cannot stop drinking after the first drink and you keep continuing to drink until, again, you've either passed out or you've run out of alcohol. The phenomenon of craving, meaning that this is something out of the ordinary, and other hard to describe, and that is that craving is limited to this class and never, and this is important, occurs in the average temperate drinker, the normal drinker, the person that can have a glass of wine and when before dinner and when dinner gets started, they will actually walk away from a drink, leaving some of the alcohol still in the glass. I often call them the problem drinkers, but nonetheless, that's what we're talking about, this average temperate or normal drinker. And this is one thing that really is hard for people to accept and internalize, and that is the allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, ever again. That is a point that admission alone is an important step in the progress of somebody's actual recovery from alcoholism. You have to understand this. You have to believe it. You have to know it. You can never safely use alcohol in any form whatsoever again. And having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, meaning that they are now powerless over alcohol, and they now understand that. And having once lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon all things human, and their problems pile up on them, we'll talk a lot about that as we go forward, has become astonishingly difficult to solve. This is really the meat and potatoes of alcoholism, and the struggle that alcoholics actually endure as they are going through this. Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I knew that when I took the first drink of any day, that was going to start a cycle in motion where I would be drinking for the rest of the night. But I didn't understand why. And this is why this page is so important to me, is because it answers a question that I could not answer for myself. I knew that once I took that drink, that I could not control the amounts that I would take. Why? Why does that happen? Makes perfect sense. It's an analogy. Okay, that once I take alcohol into my system, my body craves more and more. And so that's why this page to me is really important. And there's more gems that are going to be coming up too in the next few, and this whole page, as I say, I love it. But it answers a question that I never could answer for myself. Okay, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves, if, and I emphasize, if they're to recreate their lives.
This is a complete change in your life. Alcohol has become such an element, it's woven into the very fabric that makes us up. And the frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. We're talking here, we take a drink and we just can't stop, no matter what we think, what we try, what we do. Their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves. I can't overemphasize that enough. And as Rob really emphasized here, the if they are to recreate their lives. Again, this is a complete change in your life, and it's something that you're going to have to internalize and subscribe to in order to be able to be recovered. Rob?
Yeah, frothy emotional appeal. This is why I isolated myself from everybody, because I didn't want the frothy emotional appeal of, Rob, do you really need another beer? Rob, don't you think you've had enough? You know, why don't you come with the family and do this or do that? Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. You know, it's sad. And I became isolated. I pushed everybody away so that I could drink the way I wanted to drink. You know what? At the end, it wasn't much of a life. You know, you push everybody away just so that I can be selfish and self-centered and just drink the way I want to drink, not understanding why I'm drinking like that too. That is the baffling part of alcoholism as we know it. If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while on the firing line, see the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work, and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them.
And we are, in fact, talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. We do actually introduce the idea of what's going on, not just with the alcoholic themselves, but in the people around them, whether they be the children, the husbands, the wives, friends, family, etc. They are actually victims of this deadly disease as well. Rob?
Yeah. You know, here they're saying nothing is working better than what they're doing, the 12 steps, and 12 step, will help us out. Don't forget these psychiatrists, they would drive these people out, put them back out on the street, and then in a few months, few weeks, they'd be back just as bad as they were, if not worse. It's a revolving door. Don't forget our founder, Bill W., in treatment 3 times. So, oh well. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it's injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems to be the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity after they have succumbed to the desire again, and so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his or her recovery.
And this is really describing the insanity of drinking and the whole idea behind the fact that we do drink because we like the effects produced by alcohol, but what also is produced by our drinking, and we'll talk more about this as we go along, is consequences, and that's really where the problems come into play. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, meaning that they are causing problems, that they cannot for a time differentiate the true from the false. And again, that's a great sentence and definition of the insanity of drinking. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. Well, I just want to tell you that this is statistically 25 to 30% of all people in the world don't drink at all. And it's something that is an important distinction. 1 out of 3 people don't drink. And so what do we define by normal? And we feel that drinking is so, like I said, woven into the fabric of our lives that we can't imagine being without it. They're restless, irritable, and discontented. I know that for a fact I would wake up in the morning and my mind would immediately start trying to coordinate and situate my day so that I could start my drinking at the earliest moment possible. What do I need to get done in order to have a productive day? And define productive for an alcoholic, far less than what I'm able to accomplish when I'm not drinking. But then again, I would be, as the day wore on, I would have the after effects or the withdrawal effects and the jitters and tremors that I thought were from another problem that I was self-medicating for, and became irritable until I could finally sit down, put my hands around that glass, whatever it was, whether it be a bottle or a glass, and get that ease and comfort that I would get from taking the first drink. Now, I was always envious and actually resentful of other people because they could do that with impunity, meaning that they could drink 1 or 2 drinks and they could be done. They can walk away from a drink. They could even do it without drinking if they so chose, which just baffled me. And I also want to kind of define something here as we go along. We don't really have a drinking problem as alcoholics. We have a consequence problem. And that is really what gets us into the rooms of AA and gets us into the program, is because we've been so overwhelmed by the consequences of our drinking that it finally takes its toll. And we finally have a point where we get to that point of giving up and saying enough is enough. I've hurt enough people. I've lost enough relationships. I've lost my job. I'm on the brink of destruction, and I need something to get me out of it. So I will just emphasize again, it's not a drinking problem, but a consequence problem. And this phenomenon of craving develops as they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, and we've all been there, where we take those first couple of 3 drinks and we feel really good. And then from there, we get to the point that we don't care what we're drinking, just as long as we're drinking. and the feeling of being drunk just overwhelms us, and we do and say things that we would never do otherwise. And we finally find ourselves waking up, sometime later from blacking out and realizing that we had caused a lot of problems and discontentedness. Always get up. I'm not going to do that again. That feeling of remorse and regret. I will also tell you, at the latter stages of my drinking, I felt that remorse and that regret and that guilt from the very first sip of alcohol. As soon as I started thinking about it, there was this feeling of dread, and there I was drinking, and I knew I wasn't enjoying it at all. And I felt this overwhelming sense of negative emotions that I just described. And I've always said over and over and made promise upon promise that I was going to stop, and being unable to do that. And it wasn't until, and I took some time with my psychic change. It wasn't the epiphany kind of white light moment that Bill had. It was, for me, it was gained over time as I continued to kind of chip away at this program and realizing what my higher power could in fact do to me, for me, and that slowly letting go of what I was holding on to so tightly from before. And it wasn't until then that I finally started getting the hope that I was able to, that I needed in order to be able to stop drinking. How many times did we go through this, Rob?
Over and over and over again.
Yep.
Leo, when I think about it, now that I know that I have an allergy, all I have to do is not take it into my body and I'll be fine. So therefore, my problem is solved. Or is it?
Well, easier said than done, sir.
Yeah, if it was only that easy, right? Tony from the Keystone Group always talks about he's allergic to peanuts. So he knows he can't have peanuts, so he doesn't have peanuts. Okay? But if he keeps eating peanuts and has an allergic reaction, gets sent to the hospital, after the second or third time, where are they going to send him? To the psych ward. Because you're allergic to it. Why do you keep doing this over and over again? So there must be another problem. I'm sure that we're going to find out a few other things as we go through the book. But hopefully you learned a few things, or it was reinforced a few things that we've learned, that we can never safely take alcohol into our bodies. So therefore, we're going to get into the mind. On the other hand, as strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred in the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the few simple rules, we're talking about the 12 steps, and we will cover those in detail. I also want to say that strange as it may seem, and this is where this whole psychic change that has occurred is something that's very personal for somebody. It's very private. Now, we all know what it is, but it's not exactly the same for each of us, although it is an actual change in our life. But the interesting part is that people are amazed when they see somebody that they thought was doomed to this alcoholic death and destruction, that they have now been able to recover, and had so many problems that he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. When you get to that point and you've actually got a clear mind, you're feeling better, your outlook on life is brighter, and all of the things become a little bit more colorful. There's that encouragement, and then slowly but surely there's that confidence that you used to have that you now get back, and your ability to go out and right the wrongs and solve the consequences that you had created, and over time find yourself becoming more and more successful. It's really an amazing transition that people go through when they get this program and they do find that higher power that gives them the ability to use that inner strength in order to overcome their alcoholism. Rob?
Yeah, and that paragraph that we just read, we found out what the problem was. We're doomed to an alcoholic death if we continue the way we are. The solution, psychic change. The course of action, follow a few simple rules. So they're going to get into all that later on. Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me.
Okay, so we basically have the desperation of what would the feeling, the person coming to somebody looking for that, that magic pill that's going to get them to actually recover, and we'll just go on. But this is just that whole desperation that alcoholics have when they finally are on their knees and they're grasping onto somebody or something and asking for help. And we
And
hear
remember,
it time and
Doctor,
again, Rob.
sorry,
No, I was just going to
apologize.
say, we hear it time and again of people finally getting on their knees and asking for help, and then things start to change for them.
But then they're going to this doctor who is saying these people are hopeless. He doesn't have an answer for them. So, faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach.
Right. And this is, again, he's admitting that medical and physical therapy type of activities, while they might be initially good to get somebody sobered up, it doesn't do what is necessary in order to keep them sober and become a recovered alcoholic. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Okay, we're talking about that finding of a higher power. A lot of people refer to it as God, and that is, in fact, where we're going. But I just want to say that this is imperative for people to recover. And many types do not respond to the ordinary and sometimes extraordinary psychological approaches. I just want to underline the fact that it takes a great amount of work and effort to get to this point in the recovering alcoholic, while the steps and the program is really simple to follow. In putting it in practice, it does take work. Rob?
Effort on our parts. We have to change our whole way of thinking instead of being selfish and self-centered. Okay? I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I've had many men who have, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date, favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control.
Yeah, this is an important point here. A lot of times we think of ourselves as we're escaping reality by taking a drink. And certainly there are times when you do want to escape reality and you start drinking. But in this case, is what he's pointing out is that these men were on a positive plane, and they were doing quite well for themselves and decided to take a drink through really no effort whatsoever, and then found that they triggered this phenomenon of craving or the allergy, and then problems ensued. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control, and we're talking here about willpower when he talks about mental control, and what we are talking about is the malady of the mind. Again, the positiveness of your life. Some people drink to celebrate and or to do good. In this case, somebody was just trying to escape the phenomenon of craving. They just couldn't stand it any longer. Nothing was going wrong in their lives, and yet they did take a drink, and then all things went wrong. Rob?
There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight.
Okay, and we'll just underline the making the supreme sacrifice is that they actually die from their alcoholism.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, it's a very serious problem that we have.
The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We're all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They're over remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision.
We'll keep going, Rob, and we'll
Okay.
go through and then identify the 5 types when you finish.
Okay, then here's number 2. There is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. Then there is the manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. And then the 5th type, then there are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They're often able, intelligent, friendly people.
Certainly so. So we'll go back up a little bit here and we'll talk about the classifications of alcoholics. And there are, of course, in this case, we have 5 types. First one is the psychopaths, who are emotionally unstable. We are familiar with this type, and they are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. Those are really tough to tap into, I'll admit, with regard to that. The second one is the unwilling to admit that they cannot take a drink. That's a big one here, where you can never safely drink again. And again, I'll overemphasize this. And that is one of the decisions that a recovering alcoholic has to make, and that is they can never safely take a drink again. And there is always the type who believes that after entirely free from alcohol for a period of time can take a drink without danger. This disease is progressive. It will actually continue to get worse and worse the older you get. And part of that is actually biological or physiological, and that is that your metabolism begins to slow down as you age, and that means that you can process alcohol less than, or it takes longer to process alcohol, and therefore it creates the bigger problem for your recovery, which is slowed over that period of time. The manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. These are a lot of people that you might consider as being bipolar, and they have other problems beyond just a drinking problem, but the drinking it exacerbates the other problems that they have. And then you've got I think what I would characterize this as is the functioning alcoholic, somebody that is able, intelligent, friendly people, but they actually find themselves kind of as a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where they cannot drink normally like other people. This is an important thing and distinction to make. All of us have been in, for one type or another, have gone through this. And I'll also talk about this being really the big lie. All of these cases, people think that they can drink and control their drinking, or they can drink like other normal people, and they just can't do it. So we have to just admit that this is a big lie for ourselves. And Rob has put the different types in the chat. And I think, Rob, will go ahead and you can say a few words, and then we'll stop there for the day.
No, Leo, I think you covered that perfectly. And let's bring Bill into it.
Okay.
Oh, I know it. He won't be able to unmute himself. I apologize, Bill. Oops. Try now, Bill.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. Did a good job here. This doctor's opinion, to me anyway, is one of the most important things that they put in this book. And like you mentioned, this doctor was not an alcoholic. He was somebody who just worked with alcoholics And he was capable of getting through to a lot of these alcoholics. And he was also capable of understanding what the alcoholics were feeling, even though it didn't happen to him himself. And this first letter that he put in here, this to whom it may concern letter, that was supposed to be an endorsement for the book. And then the statement that follows, or some people call it the second letter, that was supposed to be an introduction that was intended to go into the book. And what I get out of this, the main thing that this doctor is trying to get across to us here is part of alcoholism, if not the main part of it, is physical. It's not just a mental thing. It's not just that we have no morals, or we're troublemakers, or we're looking to start trouble. There's an actual physical part to alcoholism. And he talks about what he calls the phenomenon of cravings. Until I went through this and I read this, I did not understand that. I thought everybody who took a drink wanted more. I knew that happened to me. Once I take a drink, I'm going to want more. I already knew that. I did not know that it only happened to alcoholics. That's what it says in here. It says this is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. I did not know that. I thought everybody else just had more willpower than me. They could have one or two and use their willpower to stop. They have one or two and they don't want any more. As soon as I have one, like was already mentioned, it makes me thirstier. The only way I can explain it, it's similar to that potato chip thing. You can't have one potato chip. You eat one and all of a sudden you want more and more and more. That's what happens to me with alcohol. I take one drink and all of a sudden I want more and more and more. I get thirstier. It doesn't quench my thirst. It makes me thirstier. And that's the point that he's trying to get across to us here. And it's got something to do with some kind of an enzyme thing. It would take too long to go into that explanation. If you want an explanation of it, you can listen to the Joe and Charlie recordings. They explain it on there a little bit. But basically, something in our body chemistry works a little bit different than the social drinker or the average temperate drinker. And we take a drink and we want more. They take a drink and they feel dizzy. They feel woozy. Their stomach starts to get upset, or they feel a little bit nauseous and they just want to stop. We take a drink and we want more. If I feel nauseous and I don't feel good and I take a drink, it makes me feel good. It has a different effect on me. Something in my body chemistry makes me want more. And that's the point he's trying to get across to us here with this. When you have alcoholism, you cannot take the first drink, because if you do, it's going to set you off and then you're going to be off to the races. And that only happens to us. So he's trying to give us a little bit of an explanation here on what goes on. And he also talks a little bit on the bottom of that page about being restless, irritable, and discontented. That's what happens to alcoholics. We're restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. That's something else that only happens to us. After you get to be a more advanced alcoholic, when you don't have a drink, you don't feel comfortable in your own skin until you get a few drinks. And once we take a few drinks, we set off the phenomenon of cravings and we're off to the races again. So that's kind of like starting to talk about the mental part. He doesn't really get into the mental part, but he's giving us a little bit of idea here. Well, once you get to a certain point in your alcoholism, you won't be comfortable in your own skin until you have a drink or two. And once you take a drink or two, you activate the allergy and you're off to the races again. And for me, that's an explanation or a description of being powerless over alcohol. This is kind of like touching on step one. Even though this doctor really didn't know anything about step one, I don't even think step one was written yet at the time when the doctor wrote this, but they're kind of on the same page. And the doctor knew what the solution was, and he calls it a psychic change. And he was using moral psychology to try to bring about this psychic change. He didn't really use spiritual methods. He didn't know how to get there. He knew what the problem was, and he knew what the solution was. He didn't know how to get there. Thank God Ebby talked to Bill, because Ebby brought Bill the roadmap on how to get there. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share. Good job today, guys.
Thanks very much, Bill, as always.
All right, Rob, we'll close things out with the Serenity Prayer. and then-
Yeah, if I can just throw, well, I'll say after the serenity prayer.
Okay.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.